Hello, everybody. Welcome to this brand new session of the eCommerce Explored webinar series. I have such a cool panel to talk to all of you today. We have just been gassing off stage to the point I nearly forgot to come on stage and say hello to all of you. So thank you very much for joining us live. Those of you who are watching the replay, doesn't really matter to you what time we start, does it? Because you're watching on the replay, but very cool to have you watching as well. So thank you all for tuning in. In eCommerce Explored, we like to discuss and hopefully find some answers to those questions that you e-commerce brand decision makers are wrestling with right now. Something that is at the heart of so many discussions that are going on brand side, supplier side, and everywhere else at the moment is the quality and performance of your tech stack. So discussions around AI, automation, increasing profits, increasing efficiency, all that kind of stuff is impossible if you don't have your tech stack working well. Clearly, there's going to be a lot for us to talk about. And as I already said, I've got brilliant panelists lined up. Now, what I have to do first, though, is a couple of bits of housekeeping for you. We would love to answer your questions, those of you who've turned up live. So please add those to the box that you'll find on the right-hand side of your screen, the Q&A tab, and that will feed through to me. It will also feed through to our panelists who may answer your questions before I get the chance to ask them in the video. So do start asking them in the comments area. You can test that out right now by letting me know where in the world you are tuning in from. We have more time zones covered amongst the panelists than there are panelists. You'll just have to ponder on that one. I doubt we'll enlighten you as to exactly how we've achieved that. And the other thing on the time front is, in these, I always say, ask your questions early so we have a chance to actually put them to the panel. Do not wait until 10 minutes to go. This time, I will also add that one of our panelists has to leave 15 minutes from the end. So if you want the full whammy of advice from our panelists, get your Sorry, I'm giggling because Edward Scott Finnegan is here again. Brilliant to have you tuning in to the webinar live, Edward. I'm hoping for some great questions from you, please. So what I was saying was one of our panelists has to go with 15 minutes to go. So make sure that you are asking your questions super early if you want the perspectives of all three of our panelists and maybe a little bit of my thoughts too. So add those questions now and let's see who the panelists are. We have got Claire Adams from Start With Data. We've got James Gurd from Digital Juggler, and we've got Derric Haynie, who is a brilliant mind in the world of tech and a chief e-commerce technologist and e-commerce expert. So very excited to have them. Right, let's get rid of the slides, get them up on screen so you can discover a bit more about our panelists. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
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 Very, very cool to have you here. So intros, please. Let's start with James and then we'll work our way around clockwise to Derric, please.
So hi, James Gurd. I'm an independent e-commerce consultant. I run Digital Juggler, which is a consultancy focused on e-com strategy and re-platforming, end-to-end project management. And I'm also a founder and co-host of Inside Commerce Podcast, which is a weekly tech, CX and strategy focused pod.
Which is well worth a listen, I would say. Maybe even a follow and subscribe. Claire.
Hi, I'm Claire. I am a Chief Growth Officer at Start With Data, and we are a product data agency. So we specialize in implementing PIM platforms, integrating PIM, and we do lots of other work around services and solutions to structure and enrich product data.
And anyone who's wondering why we've got a PIM specialist in this, you are definitely in the right place if you can't work out that one. Derric.
Hi, guys. Derric Haynie. I've spent 14 years in e-commerce or so. Started with an agency helping e-commerce brands. Went in-house on the e-commerce side. Saw the mess of technology from there. Went to the commerce enablement technology side and helped brands with customer service. Then I launched eCommerce Tech to connect brands and technology providers. Happily passed the company over to Chloe a few years ago and went back in-house on the commerce enablement side. These days, I am advising mostly on the commerce enablement go-to-market strategy. So how the technology should be connecting with the brands and how they should be building their products out in order to better service brands. But I've also talked with hundreds of e-commerce store owners on what the right tools are to grow their business. And most of the time these days, you'll find me playing pickleball or maybe even a little bit of Fortnite if I'm not advising a small portfolio of technology companies.
See, everybody, I told you, awesome set of panelists. I wish I had half the knowledge of any of them when it came to actually delivering integrations and tech improvements. And so get your questions in. I'm going to keep saying that again and again and again. Please do get your questions in nice and early. Right. Regular viewers, participants will know I like to start by posing a couple of tasks, questions, slides to our panelists. So we're going to start off with what is arguably an utterly ridiculously large question for the moment, which is complete this sentence. What is the best way to improve your tech stack in e-commerce in 2025? Who fancies attempting to answer that little tiny question? How would you end it? James, you're grinning from ear to ear. So how would you say?
So I would say don't just believe the PR that's out there about which platforms are the best and have the best cost models. I guess I'll answer it in a couple of stages. The first bit is consolidation and interoperability, and I know this is something that Derric will talk about as well. But it's about minimizing complexity because e-commerce tech stacks have complexity. There's no way of getting around it. But the minimization of this is about thinking about which tools work together naturally well, already have pre-integrations at a data level, so that when you're working them together, you're not having to continuously customize, build integrations. A lot of that data work is done for you, and that takes out a lot of the risk of connecting systems. And it's also about the challenging, this is how we do it. I see, because I do a lot of replatforming projects, Chloe, as you know, where I'm in a lot of time from end to end on advisory or even project leading. And one of the biggest risks in tech stacks is just proceeding with bad processes, because that's the way we've done it for years. So the bit that I always push people, and it's one of the things that people really have to ask themselves every year, regardless of whether they're changing or not, is how do we do things, and are there better ways to manage processes? Because everyone talks about technical debt, and that's a well-known thing of bloating coding that's built up over the years that causes problems. But process debt isn't spoken of enough, and that is a bit where actually, even without change, you can unpick inefficiency and get better ways of working just by addressing that. So I always get people to start with the context, which is what is our operational setup and what are the pros and cons? How are issues impacting our ability to trade and hit growth targets? And what part of that is a tech issue and what part of that is a process or a business capability issue? So understanding the limitations and what's driving them is, for me, the critical thing to being able to make improvements.
Wow, that's a thorough old answer. Derric, how would you follow up on that one?
Yeah, I'll riff on that a little. On the business process side, we're looking for tools in 2025 that are eliminating processes, not adding them. And this is it's trickier than you might think, because as you expand the business, there adds this complexity. And so you need to be vetting the tool on oftentimes it's going to be some form of integrated AI within that technology that's going to actually eliminate a process. So inside Pipe 17, which is a company I was working for last year, they used AI to take a low-code solution into a no-code solution, and it was able to go live instantly. And that was something that had never been done before. It eliminated a process that you had to have people do inside the organization in order to use the tool properly. On the MarTech stack, you could think of the same thing. I think a lot about personalization tools and how those might help influence which products we should be purchasing in our supply chain, because there are actually two things tied together. You're personalizing on-site behavior to try and sell more products, but then as those products sell out or as certain things are popularized, that might influence the merchandiser on what products they should be adding to the website. And so is there a tool that will create a process in which the person has to study the data and figure out which products they should be putting in the catalog? Or is there now an AI solution that will actually merge these things together and eliminate the process for you? Right. So there might be tools that are adding to process and tools that are removing it. One note on the data and integration side, because I definitely think 2025, the last 3 years have been about what I would call the unification of tech stacks. Well, in the beginning of e-commerce, we had the proliferation of e-commerce and then e-commerce technologies. And those technologies, you had a pop-up tool, you had an email tool, you had a personalization tool, you had a data tool, you had an analytics tool. Those should all be one tool in 2025. You shouldn't be using 3 or 4 different tools for this. And so, yes, to simplify the tech stack, but also to look to solutions that have covered an end-to-end business need and, again, eliminated the processes from it. And one final thought is on this API kind of component. What integrations are native to the tools that you want and which tools kind of work nicely together? Because the cost of building technology is getting lower, we're seeing a removal of the need for developers because AI is now creating all this code. So there's always a question, could we build this in-house? Well, in a lot of cases of technologies, what you are paying for when you're paying for a SaaS product is not even some of the core technology, which you might be able to rip off by just asking a ChatGPT to build it for you. You're actually paying for the intricacy of that team to maintain the integrations. So they understand the API docs of all of these really important integration partners, your Shopify, Klaviyo, whatever it is, right? Whatever else is important in the stack, your WMS, your ERP, and they're maintaining the integrations, which is still a full-time job, to make sure that the data is flowing properly, that you're connecting the right data points to the right data points and all other disparate sources and unifying the data, yada, yada, yada. Right. So making sure that they have strong native integrations and being able to do some sort of check on, are they integrating all the data we need? Are we putting that in all the places we need? It's kind of my final thought on the integration front.
So everyone, it's a complex thing. I think we can safely say how to do it in 2025. Claire, what would you say? Is it about data integrations and so forth, or would you have a different answer to this one?
I think, that is definitely relevant. I think probably just picking up on both of your points about the replacing the workflow. So the tech needs to kind of do the work. I was actually just at a conference in Australia where I think he's head of enterprise for Shopify was there. It was a retailer conference, and he got everybody who uses Shopify to stand up in the audience. So there's 400 people or something in there. Let's say 200 people stood up because it was predominantly, Shopify users there. He then asked them all who uses Sidekick. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Sidekick, which is like their AI agent. And he said, if you use it, stay standing. I think there were 2 people that stood standing. And I think that's another thing with optimizing. It's kind of knowing what's there and actually using it. When we go into customers, we do a lot of PIM health checks, for example, and we go in there and we see that they're just not using the functionality. They're using maybe 10 to 15% of it, or the processes, going back to James's point, have been set up completely wrong. So they're actually not getting what they need to out of the tech. So yeah, that would probably be what I'd add to that.
Oh, totally agree with you.
To riff on that really
Derric,
quick,
we've had a question coming from the audience, so I want to go to that.
Okay.
But I'm also just kind of amazed by Claire's by the only 2 of them were still stood up, because I would assume they would be more, when it's there in the tool in front of you, people will be using it, right? Edward's got a question that builds on some of the stuff we've just been talking to about how tech stack optimization is often a game of just shifting pain, which I guess is less of removing a process, but more hitting a process and landing it on someone else rather than on the original person. So any advice on how to translate the benefits of dealing with those road bumps to peeved CFO? So this is kind of a 2-parter. One, how do we avoid just shifting the pain onto someone else? But secondly, how do we get buy-in from the CFO, I think, in here? James, you look eager to answer this one.
Well, the only reason I've just gone through helping a digital director go through this and had to sit down and have sessions with a CEO and CFO who are in a very risk-averse traditional business around this, because change brings risk. And I think the biggest stumbling block is that people don't understand risk models properly. and they don't map all of the different areas of risk and put mitigations to each. And to do this properly, you have to understand who the stakeholders are, who need to be influenced to buy into a decision. CFO, CEO, could be a buying director, IT lead. And you've got to think of the risk for each of those stakeholders. And you've got to put mitigations that speak to them in their language to tell them that actually this is manageable, and give them a process for how that can be delivered with the existing bandwidth and capabilities. And there are times when people eulogize change without understanding impact. And if you don't understand impact, you can't possibly get people to buy in, because there is also the timing issue on this. And I've had this conversation a lot of times where change might be right, but timing is not right now because you've got too many resource dependencies. Maybe there's a big ERP or back office project going on where you cannot possibly handle that bandwidth internally without it being disruptive to day-to-day trading. And therefore, this isn't the right time, and you need to think about that project delivery. So for me, it's who are the people you need to influence, what are the risks to them, and what is the value prop for each of those, and then stress test it. Because if you cannot stress test it and say, this is credible and I've got evidence, your business case to those internal stakeholders isn't strong enough.
Derric, you were nodding away there. Were you just in total agreement with James, or are there things you want to add in?
Well, one thing I might just add is it sounds maybe simple, but most e-commerce brands follow a very traditional technology, from starting, in somebody's garage or off of a great idea, to scaling and to maturity, even to acquisition. And if you're able to get a CEO or a CFO that has gone through all of the stages, and just have them as an advisor where you can do a monthly 1-hour call with them to just talk through the problems in the business, that person will help you understand what the next biggest problems are in the business and organize and prepare for them accordingly. And I think James and Clare would also be great people to do the exact same kind of advisory role. So just having somebody that's been there before will help a lot, because the landscape is changing fast. The evolution of the business itself is going through pretty much the same thing for the last 10, 15 years.
But the thing which stays the same, she says, almost forgetting to unmute herself, is that humans stay the same. So the same tactics that worked 10 years ago to get buy-in from your CFO, understanding their pain points, and all the things you guys have just mentioned are exactly the same things you still need to be dealing with. Claire, anything you'd add for Edward there?
No, I think you guys have covered it all. I think I agree with everything.
Cool. In which case, Derric, I cut you off earlier. You wanted to come in on a point from Claire. So what was it you wanted to share, if you can remember?
Yeah, it was a little bit more. It was about like pricing and trying to. I see in 2025 a lot of people. So Claire mentioned the idea that tools are being underutilized. And so I love the idea of having a productivity score next to each tool. So it's like you might pay, and this happens on the commerce enablement side, but a tool like HubSpot, I've seen companies paying $4, $5, $10,000 a month for, and then you can look at the utilization of it and say it's value is being used at like $1,000 or $2,000 a month. So aligning the pricing and value through some sort of scoring rubric that is saying, are we using this tool to its fullest, I think would be ideal. And then making sure you're actively understanding how much you pay for that tool. Are you paying for seats that you're not using? Unfortunately, we still live in an age where the especially SaaS tool providers they're not like trying to overcharge you, but they're not going to go out of their way to lower the costs on you. And they're going to probably even trying to sell you more things, and you might not need those things. So just making sure that you're getting what you pay for and using what you pay for with each of your technology providers.
Yeah. Can I just add to that as well? I think we've actually had this discussion internally a lot about that whole productivity or the utilization of a SaaS tool. And I think that it's almost like in the PIM industry, it's a bit like their dirty secret that they don't want people to know what the utilization is. And because that then, I guess, devalues, or when it comes around to license renewals, how do you then justify that? But I think that would be just such a key metric. Yeah, I love that idea.
Yeah, and tying that usage back to how many people, how many human resources did this displace? That could be another way to look at it. Did this eliminate an entire process in our operations team, in our merchandising team, and in this team and that? Or did it add to it? That's the hidden cost of the shifting pain that can often be there, which is this is going to add 10 processes. It's going to take one person a full-time job. That's a $50,000, $100,000 a year headcount. We're not factoring that into our buying decision of this product, of this technology.
Yeah.
Love that angle, guys. Okay, next, let's go back to the slides for a minute. Next statement. You can have all the sexy front end tech you like, all the personalization, all the triggers, all this kind of cool stuff. But if your databases are inadequate, and by databases, I mean all your data, we're talking people, activity, analytics, marketing results, product data, imagery, videos, the lot. If your databases are inadequate, you're not getting the benefits. I mean, I'm going to come to Claire first because this is so in your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, we started this business 5 years ago, and we actually called it Start With Data at the time because we saw so many e-commerce projects going live that just didn't have the data there in the first place. So weirdly, we actually question a lot, is this still the right name for our business? And it's kind of come full circle now, because I think with whatever tech stack you've got out there, the data is the basis. I think I was talking about, we've just been at this event, and we had 20 meetings with people out there, and we spoke, out of the 20 meetings, we spoke about the tech once, which is a complete flip from the year before. It was all about talking about a PIM platform. And I think people are now realizing that if you don't have, we obviously specialize in product data. If you don't have structured data or enriched data, all of these kind of cool, sexy, agentic AI tools are just not going to work. So it's something that we've been kind of preaching about, I guess, a lot for the past 5 years, but it's now, you can't get away from it. You have to get that foundational data right, or none of it's going to work.
I feel it's like maybe the absolute obvious statement, but I figured we had to cover it. So James, Derric, anything you want to add to this, or is it just so obvious we should move on to another topic?
I think actually one area I'm going to come at, which will be slightly different, because I was going to talk about the product data bit as well, because you're fundamentally right in that, Claire. And the product data is one area where people don't spend enough time getting it right, and increasingly with agentic AI, structured data is going to determine the effectiveness of responses. But I'm not going to try and crash in on what's your expertise. The bit that I will talk about, though, is I've taken databases to look at something else, which is performance in tech stacks, and I guess how effective the technology is at handling queries to the databases and being able to respond quickly in real time and give customers the data at the front end that they need. And I think this is an area that's not thought about enough. And this comes back to the original thing about performance interoperability, is actually how scalable and robust is this? When you start throwing loads of traffic in peak, or you start scaling quickly, how good is your tech at handling that? Because a lot of setups and legacy setups creak, and they have, but yeah, back to Derric's point about the processes, there are creaking processes that are basically held together with sticking tape. And when you shove loads more traffic at it, they break and databases lock, and therefore parts of the site stop functioning. And I think that's the bit that people do not model out enough. And sometimes, and this links in with Edward's question about how do you get people to buy into change? If your site's gone down a few times on a legacy stack, what's the cost? A, to your business of the time to fix it, B, in lost sales when customers can't place orders. And how long was that for? Maybe it's 5 minutes, maybe it's 10 minutes, maybe that's happened twice or 3 times a year. You now triple your GMV throughput through that platform, or you quadruple your amount of traffic. Those breakages are going to be more frequent, and the damage to the brand and the loss of sales will increase. So that's a bit, I think, is an area that people don't spend enough time thinking about in terms of performance from a database angle. And I did the dull bit, sorry.
Just to specifically call it out, there's also how the data gets in there. If you want your merchandising team, this is going to be a bad example because you'd obviously get AI to fix this for you now, but if you want your merchandising team to be adding in the the fancy name of the color of the shirt and blue, in another field, and you've put those on different screens that they have to flick between, they're not going to be entering the right data in the system at the beginning of the process. Obviously now, if it said aquamarine, you'd have AI automatically changing that to blue. So it's a bad example, but there's that input process that has to work as well. Derric, your take on the data side of things?
It's funny that this actually happened when I was in-house at a company called BoxyCharm. We had a big performance issue where during a peak launch, the website crashed. We had something like 30,000 concurrent visitors. It was a very, very big launch, multi-million-dollar day for the company. And we had 6 months to prepare a workable and scalable tech stack so that we could have this many concurrent visitors. So it was not a surprise that this day was coming. But the tech team, we were on Magento at the time. There was just no way around it, and it had to do with a fundamental flaw in the website. This may be a little bit off topic, but it required kind of an intelligent identification of each user in order for the homepage to load. And I said, can we do this asynchronously? Can we do this if they hit the checkout button? Can we do this at a later time? And then it became about buy-in. Right, because we could have, and then the website wouldn't have crashed, but we could not get the buy-in from the executive team to change the process there. For me, though, when it all comes to data, they've already kind of said it, but first you have to have the data, and then you have to use it. And what I mean is that there's probably a lot of data you could be collecting on, most specifically, customers and users of your that are buying your product or visiting your website, that you aren't collecting. So I think there can be a blind spot in what data points we might want to be using in our business. This is, what maybe we want to use a calculated metric on website visitor over time, or number of pages viewed, or number of products looked at, or products reviewed. Like how many people know how many products a customer's reviewed? Do you have a number of that, or the score, the productivity? So there's a way in which you could use, whatever it is, your stamped, your review tool, push that data into your Klaviyo, and then have a better understanding of who your happiest customers are, who your most reviewed customers are, who the people you should most likely send free product to in order to get more reviews on a new product launch, and so forth and so on. So have the data, use the data, think about new and interesting data points that can provide value to the business in ways that you're not currently using.
Yeah, for anyone who's trying to work out where to start with improving your data, think about what data you're actually going to use first. And Derric, I love that example from back in the day, because, well, I could quite easily tangent off into about 8 other horror stories. But
yeah, right. I was trying not to go too far down.
It would be so easy. Sometimes it's so easy to turn these webinars into, well, when
Back in my day.
Message us all, but it's a really clear example of why you need to have that all-encompassing vision. You can't just think about the website impact. You've got to think about the whole piece to actually find the solutions, because they're there in the details. They may be somewhere you completely don't expect. I want to take us on to talk about AI and this area, but from a slightly different angle. I figure that the growth in AI, APIs, no-code, low-code, etc. is changing the roles of the e-commerce team. We've kind of alluded to it a little bit as we've been discussing things, but how the e-commerce team actually do things, enact things, the skill set they need, and I don't just mean ability to prompt, I mean other things, is fundamentally changing. James, I'm going to pick on you first on this one, because in the LinkedIn post I put up about this episode, you were talking about a new role within e-commerce, which I could just go answer it, but I will tell you what role you were talking about, just to make your answering slightly easier here, of the digital product manager, which is something which we think of from a software company perspective, not necessarily from an e-commerce company perspective. So what are you seeing in this space?
Yeah, so I think this isn't just related to the AI API piece, but I think it's to a broader strategic evolution in larger SMEs, and where it's been in enterprise for a while, but realizing that technology as a product needs product management discipline, which is very different to trading discipline, which is about understanding a cohesive product strategy for what is your technology vision and what is the tech stack strategy and how that aligns with delivering on the business strategy. And then it's things like roadmap management and prioritization and understand the delivery of a roadmap, because a lot of businesses end up in this quagmire of IT owned development, e-commerce owned trading, but there's no one owning the roadmap, and then ecom go cap in hand going, we want some resource. Oh no, that's not in our priorities. And that story is familiar, I'm sure, I know, to a lot of businesses. Having a product manager, they centrally own it and have responsibility, and then it's like matrix management out across all of the other people who have to have input. So IT from a, I guess, IT standards compliance point of view, the ecom teams from a trading and strategy. And I think I've seen a few more SMEs now bringing that type of person in. Sometimes it's a dedicated role, other times it is we want a ecom manager who has product management experience. So it's kind of hybrid. And part of that, I guess, is related to this AI question of, if you have a technology focused person rather than a trading focused, they will have or should have a broader understanding of technology decision making and technology investment, and be able to help guide the business through those decisions of which tools, knowing when to bring in experts, when they can make decisions themselves, and when the technology can actually unpick issues in the business where they don't need new headcount. Actually, it's quick. Come back to Derric's point earlier. Do you know what? We can use, let's take Shopify. We can use Shopify Flow to fix six manual processes. We don't need that extra web admin person. That's done. We don't need it. So I think that role is going to become more and more pivotal to e-commerce teams tapping into the benefits. And then I guess coming back to points Claire and you and Derric were making earlier about leveraging the tools you've got and getting value out of them. Because if you're using them more effectively, you probably don't need those extra people to do all this manual stuff, which no one wants to do.
I so totally buy in to that as a way we're going with e-commerce teams in the future. Claire, you've spent most of this week talking to e-commerce businesses. How are you finding this is changing their outlook and their activities?
Yeah, I think from what the conversations that I've had is that they're not necessarily downsizing their teams to kind of accommodate this, but they are, I think to James's point, they're becoming more specialized in this. So rather than just, I think a lot of the conversations that we were having previously with, smaller businesses were that they were doing kind of everything, whereas there are now people that actually really know their stuff with technology, whereas before it was kind of, they were not making it up as they go along, but they were needing a lot more guidance. Whereas I think, there's a lot more knowledge in the team now. I think, what we see from a productivity gain from AI and is that they're able to do a lot more and they're able to scale a lot quicker than what they were able to previously. So yeah, that's probably what we're seeing.
Excellent. And Derric, your take on this, because I know you're deep into a lot of these things at the moment.
It's funny. James came out with the solution to the problem, and I think I'll talk a little bit more about the problem, which is that if we can solve it with technology, and the cost of technology is going down, then we're going to have all these little tiny solutions. We're going to have maybe we'll have built just one. We've eliminated one process with technology. You said Shopify Flow. Could be even something as simple as Zapier. It could be a workflow inside of our CRM. It could be using Segment just to plug some data together that was not possible years ago. And those little automations, what they become, there's a little bit of tech debt if you don't know that they're running, you don't know how they're working. And so what happens is there no person in the organization knows how the company works anymore. And so maybe this person that James was alluding to is the person that keeps a cohesive map. And in case something, because something will break, right? And if you don't know that you're paying $2,000 a month for Segment to solve a $10K a month problem, and then somebody moves on in the company and they decide to cancel Segment, and then everything explodes. All of a sudden, your WMS is no longer getting your order data from TikTok, whatever it is, right? So I think a little bit about how the problem is creating James's solution. The problem is that because we can use technology to solve so many different things, we don't really know how everything in the business works. So I love the idea of having a one person that owns that. And I think as the organization grows, it's important to document some of these automations and processes, keep them in a centralized place, be able to review them from time to time, make sure somebody in the organization, maybe it's the CTO, maybe it's a dedicated person, understands that this is how the business is actually operating.
Can
I
I
love
just
that
add to
point.
that as well? That I think what the other, probably the shift that we're seeing is that a lot of the tech things used to always sit in IT. And I think that's what we're seeing a bit of a shift, and that it's that the e-commerce teams, the knowledge is now kind of shifting over that way. So we sell, you know, within our business, we sell a lot more to e-commerce teams than we do to IT teams now, which, you know, for even 3 years ago, that it was always to the IT team. So
yeah, every team is a tech team now, right? So I mean, even you go to merchandising, sales, they all have their independent tech stacks, and so we can't have necessarily a person dedicated inside that team that manages the technology. So maybe it's one person for the whole company, but they have to understand how technology A impacts departments B, C, and D, even if it's benefiting this department, and so forth and so on. So.
From your kind of story you told us there, Derric, I can almost see there being in a few years' time, rather than a forensic accountant, a forensic tech stack expert, you know, who you go, I have no idea how any of this works, and you pull in someone who gets all the logins and dives through it all. James, you work with a lot of businesses that are beginning their tech stack development journey or about to do a big replatforming. Do you find there to be problems of just not knowing what's going on, or that problem of not having everything pulled together in one place?
I think there's a myriad. It depends on where people have come from. So if they are like legacy tech stack businesses, so they basically had an old installation, pick your platform, it's not a criticism on any platforms, but old versions of Magento, a Salesforce, then you find just the solution isn't in line with how businesses now operate. Versus if somebody was later on to like really building out their e-com and a few years ago launched on a Shopify, a big commerce, then you have fewer operational barriers to getting stuff done, because even though that they might be a couple of years out of date for where a modern like SaaS theme and functionality is, it still gives them like tools to operate on. So I think there's a massive variance in between what legacy problems are and how they impact the business's ability to trade. Most e-com teams fundamentally don't give a toss what platform they're on. That's not the issue. What they want is to be able to have fast speed to market, to work efficiently and get things done themselves, self-serve, come back to Claire's point, and not have to go to an IT person, whether that's agency or internal, and say, we need dev resource. Oh, you can't have it. We can't have it for 6 months. Brilliant. Well, that's that part of the trading plan screwed. So and that's where I think we're seeing more focus is just trying to get a bit of freedom back.
It almost feels to me like there should be, like a Zapier account that everyone on the team's trained on. You know, everyone in the business is trained on it. It's owned communally, and you almost have a I can't think of the word, when not a purge, when anything goes, a moratorium where like it's like, right, for the next month we want you all to just work on this and see what you can automate, share knowledge and so forth, because I think a lot of people coming into marketing, coming into e-commerce, they don't have that no code, low code experience, and they're not kind of API fluent. I know I'm still not API fluent. Give me Gemini and a tool and I might manage to get it working, but I think there's kind of like that piece of training is now almost essential for anyone new in the space. What do we think?
Or retraining is now what's going on, right? Because we train people to use technology products. Now we're trying to train people to automate aspects of their daily job with the technology products. So we're actually sometimes I call it learn, do, teach is a method that I use in order to understand something. And in business, sometimes when you get hired for a job, you learn, and then you do, and then you do, and you do for the next 10 years of your life or whatever it is, right? So you actually now everyone is required to be a teacher, and the thing that we're teaching is some sort of automated technology.
Totally agree. Okay, I said earlier that one of our guests is going to have to leave us early. That guest is Derric, and we normally end these webinars with a final question to everyone about their final takeaways. Now, I want to make sure Derric has time to give us his final takeaway, so we'll do that now, and then we'll go back to normal questions. Then at some point, Derric will magically disappear. So, Derric, for the audience, what would your key takeaway be in the space of optimizing your e-commerce tech stack in the near future?
Yeah, I mean, things have changed a lot, and the older a technology company is, the harder it is to for that technology to necessarily be on the cutting edge of how it's going to use AI to displace the work you're doing. So again, the CRM is just a basic one. I've spent half my life inside CRMs, and I think in the next 3 years, you'll spend like 5% of your time as a marketer or business owner or whatever inside the CRM. And that's because more and more of the things will be automated for you. So the question for each technology you're looking to implement is, how is that technology company using AI to automate processes in my business, to automate processes in their business, which save me money? And essentially, is this streamlining my business? Is this adding more work for me, or is this taking work away from me? And by me, I mean my organization. And again, James kind of talked about mapping out all of the stakeholders and understanding their costs and risks and things like that. And so, I think it plays along those lines, which is to really add all of that up to understand the value. And as Claire pointed out, make sure that it's being utilized. It's actually being utilized. Once you pay for it, actually use it. Crazy idea.
Okay, I'm going to have to ask you a follow-up on this one, Derric, which I don't usually get to do for the final thoughts. That's very exciting. But so in my opinion, one of the reasons why Shopify has done so well is because it was built on a fresh tech stack compared to the legacy tech. We'll use Magento, the poor kicking boy of this particular webinar. But so they took a leap forward because they were on a new tech stack. Klaviyo took a leap forward because they were on fresh tech stack that enabled them to do modern things rather than trying to make an old tech stack fit into new things like the legacy email providers were at the time. Do we think there's going to be a new leap forward in this API first, AI first space? Because you have to go, well, Shopify's tech stack wasn't built for any of this or for much of this. A lot of the tech stacks currently weren't built for this. They're kind of retro fitting. So are we about to see in the next maybe 5-10 years a whole new breed come in? And Derric, I know you've got to go very quick soon, so I'm going to
you're talking about the concept of maybe MACH, which is I never remember the exact acronym. Microservices, maybe you guys know. There's headless is the last one. Yeah. What is it?
Microservices, APIs, composable, and headless.
Yes, thank you. Yes, and so and you mentioned, I think, the concept API first, and so I think this is come to fruition in the last few years and will continue that direction. At the end of the day, we do need interfaces somewhere in our tech stack, but the interoperability of tools being able to work across the board is growing. So the answer is kind of yes. Companies should be MACH first in 2025. They should be thinking about how to build that into their business. But some tools will need actual interfaces and a little bit more than that. But and tools built before 2015 probably are. I mean, we're calling these legacy tools, but they're only 10 years old. But they still have value and work. These are some of the largest companies in existence today in this stack. So how are those companies approaching modern business? Are they on top of it? Again, are they using AI inside their own company to lower costs for you? And how are they making your jobs easier? Those are, at the end of the day, doesn't really matter how they're doing it. If they're embracing, let's say, modern technologies, if they're doing it, if they literally have 10 people, doing the job that they said it was no code, but they're actually out there coding for you, but you don't have to worry about it, and it's a fair price in the market, then technically you don't really care how it's done. And I think that is the mindset of the e-commerce buyer right now, is changing to, I want things done for me. I don't really care how they get done. I do need to understand some aspects of how they get done, but not. I don't need to see how the cookie is made on every single thing.
Nice point. We're probably going to say goodbye to you very, very soon, Derric. So thank you for
I
leaving.
do have to run. So
that.
thank you guys very much.
Really good to see you.
See you later, Derric.
Cheers. So James, Clare, your take on we've gone to funny. Off my head. Right, let's sort that out. There we go. That's better. Your thoughts on that point, James. I know you've added a point in the in here, you know, that obviously Shopify is more built for this, but do we think there's about to be a big shift? Should Derric's suggesting it doesn't really matter so long as the work gets done? But is there an argument for keeping an eye on what's next gen and certainly not buying what was before the current gen?
So I think it's very hard to future gaze because technology changes all the time. The programming languages are constantly evolving, and you speak to, even going back to when like native apps became a big thing. You speak to different agencies or specialists about how they build it, and there are differences in how people are doing it. So I don't think you can fully future-proof and know for definite, but what you can do is understand that interoperability is the criticality for success, right? Technology is changing all the time. New vendors are coming on the market all the time. What the stacks that have in common that I see being successful for people in terms of ability to react quickly and speed to market, make changes without having to like rip out hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of custom development, plug and play and test things in a simpler way, is come back to those principles about API first open data, is that ability to connect stuff without having to go through custom development. So this is where I think the SaaS platforms have been really smart, and not just Shopify, BigCommerce, Centra, even platforms like Shopper, I know that people are less aware of in the UK, but strong in places like Germany, is that there are pre-built applications that you can connect in and test stuff out. And I think that's what you need, is you need to think about the type of platform you want and how easy it is for you as a team without loads of development resource to add functionality. I think that, to me, that is what sensible decision making around platform and other systems is at the moment, is how well do they connect with other vendors, complementary vendors in the ecosystem. If you find an amazing personalization engine, but it has no connections with any other tech anywhere, it's going to be far more costly to service that than it is with something that's already connected to ESPs, review, you name it. So that for me would be the principal success factor at the moment you can keep an eye on.
It is fascinating how 10 years ago it was, can it connect and how much is it going to cost me? And now our expectation is it's going to be one click or near as damn it, and we're in. It's the cost element of integration, unless you're a more complicated business that needs an iPaaS and all those kind of elements, is very much on the back burner. Clare, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think so. I'm always the whole MACH alliance thing. I think, it's great, and it does its job, but I think there are also lots of other platforms out there that are API first that haven't kind of paid to play in that kind of format. I'll probably get shot down for saying that, but so I think it's yes, there is a whole program of people that you can kind of go and look at that, but I think it's just understanding that there are other platforms that can do it. I think integrations, as you said, the idea is that you go and buy a platform and, there's certain connectors here, or you can use iPaaS. It's not always that straightforward. So being really do a lot of, pre-discovery in that to make sure, speak to other people who have actually implemented similar solutions. All of that, I think, is really important.
Yeah, that point about iPaaS middleware integration layers, Claire, it for me is one of the big game changers that I've seen for SMEs, because it has allowed them to de-risk projects by going, right, well, do you know what? We don't have to do point-to-point hard-coded stuff. ERP integration is a classic one. You take, whether it's a Shopify or a BigCommerce, and you use something like a Patchworks, high cohesion, you pick whichever middleware you want to use. increasingly brands are embracing things like Airtable as a middleware to do specific functions. I know Ollie Rhodes at Nolo Apps is doing some amazing work with leading ecom brands out there as well. And you're realizing that actually the cost of managing that part of the tech stack is coming down. It's getting democratized, and those vendors are putting more low no code solutions in, so that people without big internal engineering functions, if they've got someone who's technically minded and can handle like flow based tools, could actually start to self-serve on these. So yeah, it's a big improvement.
Okay, I want to ask one more very specific question of you guys, because this is one I find it fascinating to hear about from those who are working with brands all the time, because I have lots of opinions about what brands need to be worrying about, but but often this is the point at which a webinar completely curveballs. So I'd love to know, what are you guys finding you're getting asked about the most about tech stack optimization at the moment? What is it your clients, prospective clients, the people you're chatting to are most confused about, excited about, etc.? Claire, can I come to you first and then I'll go to James?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so there's probably two streams of consciousness that I've got going on here. So one is that I think there's a lot of, like, in our kind of market within PIM, there's a lot of confusion. There's also a lot of money spent on marketing, so people kind of get brought in and they don't really know what they need. I mean, we were talking to a customer recently who have just finished a PIM PIM buying cycle, if you like, and got to the end of it. We weren't involved in it, and they still don't know what they actually need. And so I think, and that's because actually what they need is probably a PLM, not a PIM. But because they don't actually have that internal expertise to distinguish at what point, the handover is between the two systems, and, going back to, I guess, that whole process and then where you optimize with the tech. I think that's what we're getting asked a lot about, is kind of that, where do we start, and is it the tech or is it our processes that need fixing? So I think that's probably point one. Then the other thing that we're getting, I guess it's actually the absence of what we're getting asked about. So I think we were always getting asked about specific PIM platforms, whereas now we're getting asked about how they can optimize their product data, maybe within the systems that they already have, be it their Shopify side or the BigCommerce side or things like that, that maybe they don't necessarily need a PIM just yet. That might be coming later, but it's like, do we need it now? I think is probably what we're getting asked a lot. So,
quick follow-up before I come to James. What's a PLM?
Product lifecycle management. Product lifecycle management system. So it's kind of what brands will use, which brings everybody in, from the designers to, it's all of the teams that kind of come together from
from trends to buying options to what we actually buy to
to then get it to market. Whereas a PIM is basically a container where you store that product information that's kind of before all of that, if you like. Yeah, and then that will feed information into your ERP. A PLM will normally feed information into your ERP and your PIM.
That makes so much sense. Didn't know it was called a PLM. Always learn something on these webinars, usually far more than something. James,
too many acronyms, right?
Oh yeah, far too many. James, what's your answer to this one? What are you getting asked about at the moment?
Which acronym I should spend money on? It is, but do you know what, Claire? I think that for me is the best example of how an external specialist can add value to a business. Is helping you decide whether you should or shouldn't be spending money on something. And if there's coming back to the point I made earlier about timing, is you might need something, but the time might not be now. Then you might have enablers that have to be ticked off before you can get value from that system. And for me, the best consultants, specialists, agencies, vendors out there, the ones who are really honest with people. And I've met some really good vendors as well who do this, whether it's PIMs or personalization engines, who will say, you're not ready for this yet. This is not the right use of your investment. You need to speak to us in 12 months. Sorry, that was an anecdotal build on that. But the thing I get asked the most, because of the nature of what I do, because I probably 60% of my project work, Chloe, is replatforming, either platform selection or running technical discoveries and building cost models and business cases, or running end-to-end and being the customer lead for clients through to launch. Is, do I need to replatform? And I'm glad more people are asking this, because often people go, right, we're replatforming, and then you say, and then you go through, okay, so why? What are the goals? What's the strategy? And you go, oh no, we just need to. The tech's not good. You go, it's not really the right reason. Like, what? There must be a strategy behind this. So I'm getting more people come and say, hey, look, we think we got some problems, but we don't know if we should be replatforming or not. And that for me is the right question, because it's a nuanced answer, because we all know it, right? Cost pressures are all over the place. Trading's difficult. There's a giant person, orange person somewhere making bonkers decisions that are making it even harder for people. So we've got all this unpredictability, and people are a bit reticent about committing to big capital projects if they don't know for definite the business case is there. So I get a lot of that, of people coming saying, how do I know whether I should just maximize what I've got, back to Claire's point about using the tools and getting value out of them, versus actually the setup I've got is the main hindrance to my growth strategy and my trading efficiency, and therefore I need to fix it, but I need a compelling business case. So yeah, I spend a lot of time just playing devil's advocate with people and asking them questions and challenging them on why they might need to change, and whether they've thought through the implications to help them make better decisions. Because my role is not to tell them, it's to guide them so that they can understand whether they should or shouldn't be changing.
Oh, so many things about the role of consultants and coaches I could go into, but irrelevant from this. Another case of horror story sharing about to come out there, and nobody needs that. Not Chloe's horror stories about coaching and consulting, which means it's time for the final thoughts from our final two panelists who are still here. So I'd love to know what takeaway you would like to leave our audience with. It could be something we've talked about that you want to pick out and make sure they really remember, or it could be something we failed to talk about. Either's fine. You've got about minute and a half each to answer. Claire, can I come to you first, and then I'll go to James?
Sure. I think going back to what I was speaking about earlier, so it's going back to the fundamentals, that if you want, these sexy, cool new agentic tools to be working, it's about going back to the beginning. It doesn't necessarily mean going out and buying lots of new tech. It's about going back and looking at, if we're talking about product data, looking at that data that you've got, and even just sourcing the product data for some people is step one, is actually go and find it, whether that's internally or externally or whatever it happens to be. Get it, normalize it, structure it, get it on there, enrich it, so that you will have more chance of these agentic tools finding your product, because it's happening. So you can either get on board with it. It's in its infancy, but we've seen how quickly this is moving, and it will be. You need to get those foundational pieces right. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Well, and whether you want to go agentic or not, having your product data in order, it's going to make your life easier, and it's going to improve your website. I mean,
absolutely,
fundamental basics. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, from a customer experience point of view, from a discoverability point of view, it's even internally that you're all looking at the same data. Yeah.
James, your final thought, please.
Yeah, so there's two bits. Number one is that product strategy for ecom tech is ongoing. You shouldn't be waiting for 3 years until the tech stacks are pain in the absolute arse and you're hemorrhaging money to go, shit, we need to change. This is why the product management bit is critical. You should be regularly reviewing this, looking every quarter at whether the tech stack's still properly enabling strategy, where you're diverging from that, and where costs are running amok and you're having issues with overage or bad contracts, etc., unexpected costs. So get that as a discipline in your regular strategic evaluations. Then you'll find you make tweaks rather than mass changes, and you optimize as you go forward. And then the second bit is that business goals and success criteria come before tech. Don't look at any tech until you know why the hell you're looking at it. I've seen too many RFPs where we go, we want product discovery, and then someone comes in and does a brilliant sales pitch and goes, look at this beautiful shiny bauble over here. We go, woo! And then the people who are going to use it don't get consulted, and you don't know what use cases. And you find out in implementation that, okay, it doesn't do 60% of what the business needs, and to do these 4 key use cases that are critical to your trading strategy is customization, which is an extra 10 grand you haven't budgeted for. So make sure you think about what you need and the use cases you need to model before looking at tech, and make sure you have a technical lead who can do due diligence and really scrutinize, is it simple to integrate, what is the ongoing maintenance support, and all that stuff, basically.
Brilliant final thoughts. Thank you both for being here for this webinar. Everyone who's here or watching the replay, I just want to tell you a couple of things. We'll let James and Claire go and relax. Thank you guys for being awesome and bringing your genius to this. So that's it for this one. The replay will be available by tomorrow. So a lot of the theme of this was involving everybody. So if you want to share this with the rest of your team, you'll be able to do that by tomorrow when the replay will be available on the website. And next up, we're not doing one in June, okay? So nothing's happening in June. But in July, we will be tackling sustainability and products, using sustainability for growth, the role of products, returns, and re-commerce. And then in September, because we're taking August off as well, we will be doing our annual Black Friday peak prep webinar. So if you want to sign up for any of those, just head to the website, which is webinar.ecommerceexplored.com, and you can sign up for both of those right now. That's the webinar. That's if you're watching live, that's where you are right now. Is that where that site you can go and sign up for those? And we haven't yet finalized the guest list for either of those. So if you're interested in being a guest, you will also find a link in the header, which is get-involved, where you can apply to be one of our guests. So if you're sitting there going, I want to talk about that on the webinar, then you know what to do. For now, though, thank you so much for coming along to this, whether you're watching replay or whether you're watching live. We really appreciate you tuning in, and I really hope this will help you build a better tech stack over the coming months and years. Thanks, everybody. Bye.